I'm a chef by profession. I had the good fortune of working with Gordon Ramsay. I worked with other Michelin star chefs in London City. You have a Burger King, you have a McDonald's, you have a Subway, but nobody's done it with biryani. Right? The challenge always is how do you kind of, make a chefless model when you spend 10 and 12 years doing one thing, you kind of go through that learning curve. One of the things we did very smartly in HOB is that we didn't raise a lot of money in our early days. We want to go back to basics, create something that people love, and then solve for the scale problem later. We've listened to consumers. Let's create a platform where a user can customize and assemble their biryani.
Biryani isn't just a food, it's an emotion, tradition, and now a scalable business. In this episode of The Crazy Careers, we explore how Mohammed Bhol, co-founder of CEO of House of Biryani, transformed this iconic dish into a tech-driven success story. From the high-pressure kitchens of Taj Aurangabad and Gordon Ramsay to leading a rapidly growing brand, he shares insights on leadership, vendors partnerships, and the biggest myths about running a food business at scale. He reveals the toughest challenges in fundraising and the strategies that fuel House of Biryani's growth. Don't miss this flavorful conversation. Hi, Mohammed. I welcome you to the Crazy Careers podcast. Thank you so much for giving us your time from your busy schedule.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So, before we get into the actual conversation, would you mind letting us know a bit about yourself, your journey so far, and the work that you do?
Sure. So, I'm a chef by profession. I've done
Mhm.
my culinary education from the Taj Institute in Aurangabad.
Okay.
Um, Post that, I had the good fortune of moving to London, working with Gordon Ramsay. I worked with a couple of his Michelin star restaurants. Then, post that, I worked with other Michelin star chefs in London City. And while I was there, I finished my postgrad and masters. Came back. My family business happens to be biryani and catering. So my grandfather started a traditional biryani business in the late 50s, and it's still existing. My family caters to uh, quite a large volume when it comes to the community food in Mumbai. However, when I came back, I had a very different path. I set up a bunch of restaurants in Mumbai city, ran one of Mumbai city's top steakhouse back in the day, set up Mumbai city's first French restaurant, worked with this brand called Lapa Cotodeon when they were just newly launched. And
Right.
I think my first break was a platform that I seeded, co-founded. It was called Charcoal Eats. And the idea behind Charcoal Eats was, or the biryani, my first biryani venture was very simple. You have a Burger King, you have a McDonald's, you have a Subway. All of these have taken like a cuisine category, right?
Yeah.
And they've created a very large playbook, but nobody's done it with biryani. Forget global, nobody's done this even pan India. And, this was one of the motivation which kind of pushed me to go in this. And I've been a part of the biryani landscape journey for now over 12 years.
Right. So you have mentioned like you had a close association with like Taj Aurangabad and also like Gordon Ramsay's kitchen. So how did these associations actually shape your vision for House of Biryani?
So, it's actually 15 years hence, when you look back, everything that you do today, it's connect the dot backwards.
Yeah.
I think what Taj Aurangabad did is probably at that time, even today, it's one of the premier institutes in the country. So they kind of open you to ideas and possibilities which are beyond the landscape in that era, the Indian landscape.
Yeah.
What the experience in London did was kind of actually opened me a complete new world, right? Because in that time, social media was not really existent. So
Yeah.
you never really knew what was happening in terms of exposure. So the
Yeah.
only exposure, the only way you could get exposure, like today, you get a lot of ideas and exposure through social media. In that time, it wasn't. And what the experience in London did was probably open my eyes and possibilities to the various formats, knowledge that is there existing. And yeah, of course, if you kind of, dip yourself with that level of exposure very early on in your career, you kind of pick a lot of, small nuances. One of the things that I picked up in my experience working in London was the efficiency that chefs used to work, the way they used to prep, the planning they used to do. And of course, all of this definitely helped when you kind of bring it in your career moving ahead or in your entrepreneurship.
Yes. Yes, of course. So we all know that when we talk about scalable food business, a idea of like burger or maybe Italian cuisines or maybe Chinese cuisines comes in. So how did you make biryani as a scalable business apart from like going into the traditional path of like all other cuisines?
So if you actually look, Indian food is one cuisine that is actually guilty of not really adopting the scientific methods of
Yeah,
creating a dish. If you look at burger, you look at pizza, right? All of these come from a bent of mind of food industrialization and supply chain. That is the backbone. So when you go to a Subway or you go to a McDonald's, irrespective which McDonald's you go to, right? Your chicken burger or your paneer burger is going to taste the same because the patty comes from the same manufacturing unit. And I think that is very important. That's a very important point because the components of the food that you eat, where do they come from? How are they mass produced? And I think the idea is how do we, the vision was, okay, how do we take that philosophy but apply it with biryani? So what we really learned is, okay, what does the biryani consist of? It consists of your masala, it consists of your protein, it consists of your rice. Okay, if I were to break all these three components down and reassemble, can I truly bring a fresh, authentic dish which will be loved by the masses? And if I were to do that, how do I then kind of take each of these components and backward integrate the same way a burger and a pizza has done? And I think this is what we've done in our 12-year journey. However, in my previous venture, I was very guilty of probably doing this at a point where you are diluting the product. Uh, the consumer will not accept a diluted product, a subpar product, just because you want to backend it or you want to make it chefless. So the challenge always is how do you kind of make a chefless model, but at the same time, you retain the freshness, quality, taste, flavor, texture of a fresh biryani. And what we've done successfully in HOBs, we've kind of married both of these points.
right. So can you share an example of your leadership style that actually led to a mass success and helped HOB to become a scalable business?
So, look, I mean, I think less points on leadership and more on what you learn on lessons as an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
When you spend 10 and 12 years doing one thing, you kind of go through that learning curve where in HOB, I think there was a 8, 10 year experience of running a biryani platform. Uh, like I mentioned earlier, right? Uh, Dilution was something that we didn't want to do. And in the name of scale, pursuit of scale, you kind of lose touch with the pulse and the feedback of consumers, what they really want. One of the things we did very smartly in HOB is that we didn't raise a lot of money in our early days. And
Okay.
the people we raised it from, we told them actually, we were the antithesis of scale. Actually, we were opposite of scale. We told them, listen, we are not interested in scale. We want to go back to basics, create something that people love, and then solve for the scale problem later. So, what really happens is when it's good to have scale in mind, but you can't really solve for scale when you don't have your first 100 users, 500 users, 1,000 users who love what you do or love your product. Because if you cannot create that kind of a community, then it doesn't matter, right? Scale is irrelevant. So one of the things that we've done, which have kind of laid a successful pathway for HOBs, we've listened to consumers. We've realized that, people in the biryani space especially don't want authenticity. They want flavor. They want consistency. And most importantly, our biggest success mantra has been we are the only biryani brand that allows you to customize. So unlike any other biryani brand where biryani traditionally is a very static product, right? That's
Yeah.
why you see some of your friends say, oh, I like a biryani from here. Somebody will say, no, I like a biryani from there. Because there are certain attributes which they enjoy, which they prioritize in that particular biryani. We understood that very early on in our journey at HOB. So what we really did is we said, okay, you know what? Rather than being uh, a moral policing on what a biryani recipe should be like, let's create a platform where a user can customize and assemble their biryani. And to me, this has been our strongest USP and success mantra in our journey.
Absolutely. So what is actually the role of vendor partnership in this kind of business?
So when you talk about vendor partnership, I'm assuming you're talking about the suppliers who we buy
Yes.
from.
Yes.
Uh, so look, I believe anything if you want to create scale, you can't be treating your suppliers as vendors. Okay. The way we see it is it's a deep partnership because at the end of the day, there are some things that you buy off the shelf, but most of the things that we do are very customized on the back end. And to me, that customization only is successful when you have not a transactional relationship, but a deep relationship where, it's more a partnership model where you jointly both understand that you're going to be working to basically give the consumer the best of the experience. Everything else is secondary, in my opinion, right? And when your partner base, your supplier base understands that what they do and how it impacts consumer value in the chain, I think there's a very good symbiotic relationship that forms.
Right.
Anything that you do transactional is very short term.
That's absolutely true from both the end, like vendor end also and also customer end. So,
Yes.
yes. So, how does your tech-driven approach actually ensure quality when you're planning to grow it rapidly? The platform you want to grow it rapidly. So, how will it ensure the quality also at the same time?
So what we do is all the components that go in our biryani, they come
Mm.
from a manufacturing unit.
Mhm.
Uh, it is basically, the recipes are locked in. There's high amount of QC that happens, and there is portion packing that happens at the manufacturing level.
Okay.
Through supply chain that is moved from the kitchen to the distribution center. And when you order a biryani, simply the guys is opening the pouch, whether that pouch is of a sauce or a protein. Now, as long as you have a singular source of origin, it doesn't matter where that pouch is going, whether that's going to a store in Delhi or whether that's a store in Bombay or a store in Dubai. The taste, quality, consistency of that product is going to remain the same.
Right. So it is a perishable item at the end of the day. So how will you ensure like it reaches to the customer at the same time and and I mean maintaining that scalability also at the same time?
So, the product that we have, once it's made, it's temperature controlled. So once
Mhm.
it's temperature controlled, there is a little amount of shelf life that is there. And using that same temperature control base, we transport that from the kitchen to the warehouse to our store. As far as your question on perishability is concerned, I think by now there is quite a bit of data that is available in terms of demand. So, there is never a situation where demand is not met or food is wasted. Our wastage is absolutely low. So based on demand, the movement of goods happen. As you grow, and as you crack the code with the consumer, uh, I think the complexity is on supply chain. So, it's a very famous line by Domino's also, right? We happen to be a pizza company, but actually our success is because we do supply chain really well. And I think uh, cracking supply chain at a molecular level seamlessly is extremely important when you want scale.
Right, that's true. So based on the data, which is that region in our country where the demand for biryani is more?
So look, biryani, if you really ask me, typically South would be one region where the highest demand for biryani, because biryani for them is it's not a celebration, it's a way of life, it's staple, it's everyday food, right? And if you actually see rice consumption is the highest over there. However, that is one market that is extremely tricky because one point you have to note is you will see McDonald's selling the same chicken burger whether it's Bombay, Kolkata, or Bangalore. But when
Yeah.
it comes to biryani, it cannot be because as you keep changing community, caste, your region, what biryani means for each individual, depending on which region and which community and which religion they come
Yes.
from, is very different. So just because a product is successful in Bombay, we cannot just copy paste that to Bangalore. In fact, Bombay and Delhi, we could say there is high level of similarity on product market fit. Yet we spent 6 months fine tweaking the product for Delhi. Like for example, Delhi likes a much creamier palate. Also, Delhi cuisine is extremely, extremely high when it comes to kebabs and curries. Biryani is slightly under penetrated. So these are few of the nuances that we have to understand. We say India is one country, but actually we are super, super fragmented when it comes to Indian food.
Yeah.
Western food, not at all, because Western food is something that we've adopted. It's not natural to
Yes.
us, right? Whereas Indian food is extremely natural to us. You being from, the east side of the country, you must have noticed how biryani is so different in Odisha,
Yes.
and there is a vast difference of biryani in Surat, right? Uh, so it's extremely tricky, which is why you don't have a pan-India biryani brand. And there are so many who have tried but failed. Reason being is because when you go and enter a new region, you have to first understand what biryani means for them. You have to understand their cultural, they build a cultural rapport with them rather than saying, hey, this is what a biryani should be. And understand what are the ingredients, in what format do they consume, what is the ratio between the rice and the masala and the protein. Like in South, meat with bone is a must.
Yeah.
Boneless biryani is not that much. So, these are some of the user behavioral influences which are there with biryani, which don't exist with other cuisine category. But unfortunately, if you don't get them right, you cannot be successful.
Yeah. One of the funny moment I could recall because one of my colleague was from Kolkata, another colleague was from like Punjab. So when we were having discussion sometime, and then uh, in eastern part of the country, we put potatoes in biryani. But this Punjabis and all, they laugh at it. Like, who put potatoes in biryani? So that's the difference. Yeah.
Correct. That's why, we at House of Biryan have this concept called Meri Wali Biryani, whereas you can go crazy, mix and match your proteins, add your aloo, make it spicy, choose your sauce, do whatever you want. And our whole narrative is that, we are a platform. We are not custodians of what biryani should be. You decide what biryani is for you. And because everyone is different, we cannot say, hey, this is how a biryani should be eaten. Uh, and I think this has really worked well for us because very interesting, right? One, it helps us solve the problem of uh, aloo or no aloo is one
Yeah.
example in the biryani. And two, if you see the younger audience don't care about authenticity. They want taste, flavor, they want consistency, they want quality, and they want it very quickly, which is why, close to 80% of our orders are delivered within 35 minutes.
Right. So, what is the biggest myth of running a food business at scale?
So I think first, when you start something new in the food business, don't think of scale.
Yeah.
Uh, think really small. Think of how do I get my first 50 users, forget 50, 10 users, then 50 users, then 100 users. How do I get them to really love what I do? That is one. Two, before you go out and solve a certain problem, understand what the addressable market is. You don't want to be solving something for a market that is really small because
Yeah.
then even if your product is really good, it'll just be a challenge to scale. Three, understand what your distribution is, right? Once you've got a category, you've got great users, track the repeat. Repeat is very important. The
Yes.
addressable market is large. Then also see, how are you different from the others? And that's a very important point. You don't want to be doing just a slant version of the same thing and competing with in a very overcrowded market. So when you get all these three, four things right, automatically you will drop down and you will figure out a formula. Also, seldom in food, right? You have a certain plan and vision, but as you go along, you have to be fluid as a founder and as a platform, as a company to kind of keep your ears on the ground and see what people want. You might have a vision, you might have a certain idea, but as user feedback keeps coming in, the market is going to tell you, hey, maybe your idea was ABC, but we want maybe EFG for that matter. And I think adapting quickly, keeping your ears on the ground, ensuring as a founder in your early days you're talking to consumers is very important.
Right, right. And also flexibility. I mean, since you mentioned about adaptability, so founder should always be flexible towards
Right.
the consumer's feedback. Also, what has been your biggest challenge in fundraising and how did you overcome
We raised capital at 2022, which was, I think, one of the worst times. Funding winter had just begun.
it? Yeah.
2020 and 2021 saw, 2020 was COVID, but 2021 saw uh, a barrage of liquidity. But at the same time, 2022, you saw all that liquidity drying up. I think the other thing is that, any sector, any industry that you're doing, you also have to see the sentiment with that industry in the market. So unfortunately for us, 2022 and 23, Cloud Kitchen sentiment was not great. Like even today, because exits have been far and few, and this I'm talking about even from a POV of players who have been funded with millions of dollars before us.
Yeah.
It kind of really puts pressure on the industry as a whole. Which is why I think it's very important to have a few success stories, which I'm, crossing my fingers and they happen. Uh, and with HOB, it was no different, which is why I think last year we kind of pivoted to a global investor audience. My last fundraise that we did last year, uh, 90% of that capital came from a fund in the US and a family office in the Middle East. We're just closing our pre-series A round as we speak in the next 1 week. And even this funding, 90% is come from investors abroad. From us, philosophically, what we are building is we are building a global biryani brand from India. And I think that story and that narrative really helped us. I am in Dubai currently as I talk to you, and we're launching 3 stores in the next couple of weeks. We also intend to seed a conversation that is ongoing for both Japan and Australia this year, hopefully. So the idea is that, I feel biryani is absolutely misrepresented, underrepresented at the global stage. And with this narrative, we kind of pivoted to a global investor audience, which is how we overcame the challenge that we were facing of raising cash in India.
All right, it was really an insightful conversation with you, and thank you so much for joining us. And I know, like, you have been busy, and but then thank you so much for giving us your time from your busy schedule. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Take care. Bye.